The coaching carousel has begun. Who's going to be next? Grab a drink and join us on this week's Tailgate. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us again. I am Luke.
I'm Michael.
I'm Dennis.
There you go, and thanks for joining us. So, our sponsor.
Our sponsor. Yeah, our sponsor. Let's just jump right into that. Our sponsor tonight is Explore Tours. If you're in the Middle Tennessee area and you're looking for an adventure tour or just a history tour or a walking tour just to get to know Nashville and hear and experience the story of Nashville, check them out at exploretours.com. So this past weekend, we had some insanely good games and then other ones. Yeah, then we had some other ones that were not great.
Depending on who you are, who you're fan
Well,
of.
yeah, that's true. Depending on your fan base, I think we kind of made similar mention to that last week, but it just wasn't. There were some games that were incredibly competitive, and then others that were very much
and
not.
even as a fan, you don't. I mean, it's not fun to
No.
watch your team.
True.
It's not like you volunteer for that,
Right.
You know,
So
Seriously. Okay.
just have to throw it in there.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't even notice it. Good job.
Anyways, so I'll start it off because I feel like mine was not only was it like one of the ones that I picked for an upset, but it also just ended up not being as competitive as it should have been.
True.
Was Ole Miss going to UGA and playing Georgia? Originally picked that as an upset. Part of that was just my own hopes as a Tennessee fan to see Ole Miss beat
One last
Georgia,
hope.
and but that would also have required Tennessee to have also beat Missouri, and that didn't happen.
Close.
Nowhere close.
There is no beating out there.
No, hey, and so not any of that. So Georgia they showed up. They played dominant the entire game, especially the second half. It was almost like Ole Miss wasn't there. Now what I will say is that Ole Miss, the players, didn't seem to give up. They did continue to play with a lot of heart. When I saw multiple different times throughout the second half where they were literally legitimately making some phenomenal plays. The problem was it just seemed like the play calling was really just boring.
Yeah.
It was unimaginative. A lot of just running, just run.
When we were watching it, we saw maybe 3 run plays in a row.
Yeah.
And a
And they're making 1
drive
or
after
2
another,
yards.
even if it was already punted in a new series.
Yeah, and it which just doesn't make any sense. You shouldn't if you're not finding success on the run game or the pass game, you've got to get creative with it.
Yeah, switch it up a little bit.
Lane Kiffin is a phenomenal offensive mastermind. There's no reason at all for that kind of lackluster performance by the coaching staff, because that's what that was. That wasn't, Lane Kiffin wants to make it about the fact that there's only 1 5-star on their team and there's 24 5-stars on Georgia's team. I'm like, that's just a giant excuse at this point.
It became apparent though, even with coaching. So
Yeah, even if it's true, I mean, you've won enough games.
Yeah.
And you've looked amazing in enough games.
Yeah.
That this is one of those times where you step up, and as coaches, you have to make the right calls,
Yep.
do the right things.
Exactly. So again, I picked it as my game of the week, and the first half seemed to be relatively competitive. Again, you were seeing some of the best of Georgia with Bowers back and everything like that, and it seemed like Ole Miss was kind of matching some stride. But again, it's just that second half adjustments. Ole Miss just didn't even show up. So it's just kind of it ended up being a kind of a boring game into the third quarter. So.
Well, and you're talking a lot about running.
Yep.
Well, that's a perfect segue into my game.
Segues.
Where a team did not. Well, they will say that they did not attempt to pass in the second half.
Yeah.
They did attempt to pass. It was just called as a pass interference, so doesn't really count.
Yeah.
But that was Michigan and Penn State.
Uh-huh.
So, interesting fact, Michigan had 32 rushing plays in the second half. They did not attempt a pass in the second half, minus that pass interference. Michigan obviously won 24-16. As I said last week,
You did.
it was a boring game. It's a defensive game. So
It was very
Corum
much
had
so.
a couple big runs.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, J.J. McCarthy, he had a 96.2 QBR
Wow.
which sounds awesome until you hear that he was 7 for 8 with 60 yards. Yeah, so that's kind of
too funny.
He has a great QBR, but
Yeah.
you might have to. Blake Corum, however, 26 carries for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns.
That's pretty good. Especially against Penn State's defense.
Against Penn State's defense, which their rushing defense, which was tops in the nation, just got gouged the second half.
Yep.
And even their backup running back, Donovan Edwards, had 10 rushes for 52 yards and a touchdown.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's, they had a lot. Penn State, Drew Aller was 10 of 22 for 70 yards. He did have a touchdown, but had a 56.7 QBR. Penn State total had 164 yards with 1 rushing touchdowns. They both had a fumble.
Yeah.
Penn State lost theirs. Aller kind of killed a drive with a lost fumble. Penn State's offense is just horrible. I think Aller has a lot of potential.
Yeah.
But he just, in these big games, he just always makes a mistake. He's just not quite there. Which, and we'll get into this later on, led to the firing of Mike Yursich, their offensive coordinator. Now, I will say Michigan, I think they're a great team, but they did not look as dominant as everybody wants to make them out to be.
No.
You really can see where a team that has some talent can put up a fight and can make Michigan actually have to work hard for it. So especially with Jim Harbaugh sitting out for suspension, you've got the last 2 games where anything could happen. So depending on how important you think a head coach is, we'll see what happens. But yeah, so it was a fun game to me because again, I like defense, I like rushing, I like that old style of play. But it was a very boring 24-15 game.
It was boring, but it still felt competitive.
It did feel competitive.
Like
yes. It wasn't until later in the game when they really kind of took it. It was a close game throughout. And so it was a great game. Was a competitive game. But if you're liking that like up tempo, that UT Ole Miss kind of style of play, you didn't get it here.
No, yeah.
So.
I mean, but I still had a lot of fun watching it because it really just reminded me of like old school football. Just a lot of ground and pound. It was all one in the trenches, and so which was a lot of fun to watch. But
kind of takes you back.
It takes you back a little bit. But it like Penn State's offense was 100% exposed for how lackluster it actually is.
I mean, honestly, I feel like they were just kind of playing like their Iowa. Like that's how I feel like their offense was.
They looked it like when you watched them. You look at the bottom part of the Big Ten, and you have those Iowas and Northwesterns where it's like. Yeah,
just all defense.
Yeah, you're playing defense, but
your best offense is defense.
Yeah, for as much as Penn State has talked about their offense, and for as much as they've tried to work to improve their offense, it's just not showing up the way that it should at this point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, kind of going to the game where I kind of was saying the game of the week was Washington and Utah. This game was definitely, I feel like, to me personally, I felt like it was more competitive.
Yeah,
it was definitely back and
agreed.
forth.
Yep. Yeah.
One thing that kind of surprised me, there was the fourth quarter. There was actually there was no points scored, and I didn't when I was watching the game, I really had to think about it. I'm like, like no points were actually scored in the fourth quarter, because it was.
I didn't believe you.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like I had the same reaction. I was like, because I don't know. To me, it was going back and forth. I know Washington had a pick, almost a pick 6, and then the guy just kind of left it there at the 1. And I was like, how do you, like, as a defensive player, you don't get a whole lot of chances to score. Just kind of drop it behind you. Like, you have one, just take the ball. Just take the ball to the hole, especially with that. But luckily, they were able to recover it right there at the 1, and it kind of still went into their favor. But Washington, I feel like, just kind of escaped with the win, though. Like, Michael Penix actually did really well. I feel like even playing against Utah, he had 332 yards, 2 TDs. So his type of numbers that he typically kind of tends to kind of put up, high yardage and everything. But I generally kind of enjoys the game. Barnes threw it was 17 for 30, 267 yards, 2 TDs, but he also threw 2 picks.
Yeah.
So in a game as close as this, I feel like that was something that turnovers is crucial not to happen. And I genuinely, part of me felt like Utah could have easily won this game if it was just for a couple mistakes that they kind of just flat out just missed.
Oh yeah, totally. And I again, like as we were talking about before we started recording, like the transitive property doesn't exist in college football. Like watching Utah be so competitive against Washington and basically not show up against Oregon doesn't make Oregon automatically that much better of a team than Washington. But what I'll say is like what it shows is that Utah, even though they're having to rely on second and third string offensive, players, that they've over this year they have figured out they
figured out ways to win.
Yeah, they've figured out some codes to success for them, which is awesome. Because what are you gonna say?
Oh no, I was just saying. And to your point, 2 interceptions in a 7-point game.
Yeah,
like you have Utah didn't score in the second half, so those 2 interceptions, 100% is just that kind of puts that dagger in. Like you're twisting the knife yourself.
Exactly.
So
no, but it was a game that I wish as Michael was saying, like, Utah could have gone easily well if they just didn't have the third and second string players kind of going for them.
Oh yeah, I really, and I think we talked about this. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but I mean, just how much different Utah's entire season would have been if Cam Rising was in.
Honestly, I don't know if they would have been undefeated, but I feel like they could have easily been a 1-loss team.
Yeah.
Well, you look at a game like this, like one of the things Rising was really good at was protecting the football.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you look at a game like this where 2 interceptions kind of seal your fate, these are the type of games where I think you
just can't have a pig farmer as your quarterback.
He's going to be the one that
he'll be there eventually. He'll get there eventually. He's doing all right. Like it's he's a third stringer, right?
I believe he's a third stringer. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, a third stringer being able to put those types of points on the board is incredibly impressive against even if it is against the 95th worst defense in the country. It's
still better than USC.
It's true.
Right.
See, and that's all the silver linings. So
it shows, there's a touchdown difference. They scored 34 with USC. Here they scored 28. So, that little differential can kind of really help out with that.
That's true. But talking about making big plays on some of the best defenses in the country
I feel like that would have to be, that kind of goes into my catch of the week.
Okay.
Like Ole Miss, kind of with Georgia, I know that was your game and everything like that, but there was just an amazing catch.
That's true.
By the Ole Miss player. I'm trying to get his name here. Ole Miss, Dane Wade. He just kind of stretches literally as far as you could possibly can to grab that ball, and he was just able to bring it in, reel it in. Like, it was so smooth.
Yeah.
And if you were watching the game, you could see like the announcers themselves were surprised. And I feel like depending on which angle you saw, you even saw some Georgia's players just like kind of turn around like, yo, did he really catch that?
Yeah.
Like, can we get a second look on that, please?
Yeah. It
was an unbelievable catch.
I remember the announcers for that catch they were like, wait, did he catch that? Hold on. And it was like because the view that the angle they had, it looked like he had just dropped it.
Right.
Until they go back to the replay and they're like, oh my goodness. Like, he just plucks it right out of the air and it was gorgeous.
So I got to say it. A very Marvin Harrison Jr. type catch.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I feel like it was better than Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, it was like that, or like
throw that kind of catch,
or like a Keon Coleman.
Many people have thrown that kind of catch.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, true. There was actually a lot of those types of catches this weekend. I think we're talking about that earlier.
Yes.
But this Ole Miss one,
there have been a lot of those type of catches.
That's true.
Like, this is I really wonder, are receivers just becoming that kind of talented and kind of that flexible, like to be able to do that, or are they searching for like the highlight reel?
Nah, the gloves are just really sticky.
Right.
They're using stickum gloves.
Right. They've been putting a lot of genetic testing into making people's hands bigger.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's happening.
Yeah. You know what they say about guys with big hands?
They wear big gloves.
That's right. And they catch big. Anyways, but talking about like other plays of the week, what do you have for the hit of the week?
I think the hit of the week, I actually have an Arkansas player when they were playing versus Auburn. I'm trying to get his name. Like, I really kind of missed
the guy who got
that,
ejected.
to be honest. Yeah. Like, I was trying to see that. I really couldn't find
He's
it.
so important. He got ejected.
I mean, he deserved to be ejected, but he kind of it when you were seeing the play, the Auburn player looked like he was having a nice run. It was like a perfect play. And if you're watching the game, he just completely, I feel like he was just a missile.
Yeah.
It was obviously targeting, and he was just a missile, just kind of like laid him out towards the beginning of the second quarter, like about around 11 minutes.
Yeah.
And you just kind of see him walking away too. Like he was just kind of stretch him. It's like, yeah, I did that. Like I know it's targeting. I'm just gonna already start walking off.
Yeah.
He was
Don't even
already,
gotta think about it.
they're like number or whatever. He has
I
to
believe it was
leave
number 8. Yeah,
number 8.
Yeah,
is forfeited. And they're like he's already in the
he
shower.
literally has his head down. He's just like, I'm already.
He's
ready to
sitting
go.
on
You
the
don't gotta
couch
tell
at
me.
this point, just
Right.
eating
Well,
some Cheetos.
And to be fair, like one of the things I noticed from that, and Michael, you mentioned it, just how composed Auburn has been this year,
Mm-hmm.
and that you could really see it on this, where he did this on their sidelines, and none of them got up, none
True.
of them got in his face. I mean,
Yep.
it was one of those. It was a bad hit, but none of them did anything that would warrant them getting penalized or kicked out of the game. So, like, kudos to them for that, because that's a hard thing to do, is watch a teammate get leveled like that and then do nothing.
You really just want to stand up for your teammates,
Mhm.
like you said, it shows a lot of strong discipline for Auburn, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I feel like genuinely they're a really good team. They're just they're still growing and trying to figure out
Mhm.
who they are.
Oh yeah. Well, and
For sure.
once Auburn solidifies their offensive issues, next year especially, because I don't see Hugh Freeze having that much of an issue getting offensive players, because he can develop them pretty well. They're going to be
Especially with their kind of recruiting he does.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he's flipped some recruits already this weekend, which is pretty impressive. And so it's just like with the type of recruiting he does, and like just the fact that he knows how to develop them, like they're gonna be a very, very dominant team, or potentially very dominant team in the West. Obviously the West is the East and West SECs goes away next year, but so it's just they're going to be a tough team to play against, especially at home. So they're already hard to play at home. Anyways, but talking about Arkansas, that kind of leads us into what we're originally talking about, just kind of our main topic. Yeah, main topic of the evening, our coaching carousel. And I guess we'll start off with.
Can we get some carousel music playing?
I mean, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Listen to that carousel music. Thank you, editor. So, but like you got Pittman at Arkansas, who's currently on a hot seat. He's a great coach. I really do like him. He has been dealt so many bad cards.
Yeah.
And
gotta play the hand you're dealt, though.
But you got to play the hand you're dealt, and he has not been playing very wisely.
No. And
so I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the axe. He might even get the axe before we even publish this episode. But it's just one of those things like that. He along with one other SEC coach are very much on a hot seat right now, and like the fact that like his is again the one that's the less understandable. And what I mean by that is like the he again had the bad hand dealt to him. He's had coordinator trouble and stuff like that all year,
right?
And actually for the past couple of years. And so it's Arkansas. Arkansas is not known as being a very wealthy school from a standpoint of like having a lot of money, being able to go in to throw at recruits, NIL, all that stuff.
Nobody
And
wants to go to Arkansas.
Oh, exactly. Well, exactly. But like the thing is, growing up, Arkansas was always a tough team. They were always like consistently getting 8 or 9 wins. Like they were never at the top.
They were well coached.
But they were well coached.
They were well coached. They were disciplined.
The team you couldn't overlook.
Yeah. But the other coach that's very much on a hot seat, and this one I think is more understandable, is Billy Napier. He's a guy that's gotten the recruits, that has the money, and what has he done with them? They're currently projected right now to go 5-7, which is what we picked at the beginning of the. I think what I picked at the beginning of this year, and so I expected them to not go to a bowl game, and they've got to play Florida. They've got to play Florida State next, and they also got to play Missouri next. They're not going to win either one of those games, and especially with what Missouri just did to Tennessee, Florida's going to Columbia. They're going to have the same kind of whooping. That's going to and unless they surprise us, but I just don't see that happening.
No, I'd be surprised.
So yeah,
yeah. And I mean, we've already got a couple of the ones that I've seen is you've got Grinch.
Yep,
that was,
he already axed.
He was fired from as
I'm
the
so
offensive
happy about that. I'm not
defensive
gonna lie.
coordinator.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sorry for USC.
Yeah.
And then obviously Penn State this weekend after their loss fired Mike Yursich.
Yep.
And so their offensive coordinator, which again, both of those, if you look at them, the defense for USC was atrocious, and there's nothing that you can do with as bad as they are. he should be gone. Same thing with the offensive coordinator for Penn State.
Yeah.
Penn State's offense has been atrocious. They have not lined up with their defense,
Mhm.
and so it's not surprising that happens.
Yep.
Now, to kind of piggyback off that,
Mhm.
I would also say that I think those firings were buying time for the head coaches.
I agree with that.
I think that when you look at Lincoln Riley, we talked, I think, last week about him
We did.
never having a season where he hasn't lost at least 2.
Yep.
And then you look at James Franklin, who it's very obvious when you look at his tenure.
He always has 2 losses too.
Well, he always has 2 losses, but he came into a place that the expectations are beat at least one of these two teams,
yeah.
Ohio State or Michigan. You beat one of the 2, and he doesn't do it. You know, he has in the past, but not consistently enough for them to take that next step. Now, with all of that being said, the question, and I said this in one of my shorts, and I say it every time somebody, I remember saying this when Jim Harbaugh, when Michigan fans wanted to fire Jim Harbaugh a few years back, was who are you going to get that's better that you can actually get? I think a lot of these teams look and go, oh, well, let's just get somebody better. Let's just get somebody who's going to take us the next step.
But I mean,
Yeah, who?
do you think though, like with Penn State though, with Franklin though, since it's known that he's been losing to Ohio State and Michigan every single year, but then you look at his total stats where when he plays the top 10 team, he's 3 for 17. So it's just like, it's not just these 2 teams that you keep losing to, but you keep losing to any talented team. Like you can't compete.
Right.
It goes to show like you can't compete in the college football playoffs then, and even if it extends next year to 12, you can only compete with 2 teams. You probably be in the other one, so you could probably only compete with 1.
Right. And are you getting a big kick from being the 3rd biggest dog in a conference that isn't very deep? And then next year, when UCLA and USC and Washington and Oregon come in, you've all of a sudden.
I knew those are the more notable teams right now currently in the Pac-12.
And they come in, and now you're moving from 3rd to, like, let's do best case scenario. They're 5th.
Yep.
Best case scenario, they're 5th.
I mean, yeah.
So, I mean, it's we're going to see. And I think that with them coming in next year, I think Franklin, unless he does some kind of drastic turn, his time at Penn State is.
He would have to be, I feel like, at least 2 of those teams. I feel like 1 is no longer enough.
Yeah.
So, but then one guy that you can't really feel bad for, even though he did get the axe, was good old Jimbo Fisher.
We had to talk about Jimbo Fisher.
Somewhere, go somewhere far.
Hey, we're going to assign this check for you. It's going to be for $77 million, and we don't care what you do. Just leave.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to feel bad. He probably has to cash that entire check all at one time.
I hope they give it to him in pennies.
Taxes.
I hope they give it to him in
pennies. Go ahead, take it. We're going to give you a truck full of pennies. Like, just the amount of taxes, though, he has to pay in one check, man. Instead of spreading it out through a whole bunch of years.
Oh, well, that's what they're doing. They're giving him they're giving him like $19 million.
Yep.
And then like $7.97 million per year for the next like 7 years.
Yeah.
Here's $8 million a year.
I'm just concerned about inflation for him. That's it.
Well,
who's going to subscribe with less than $1 million?
And again, like while we've hit all these other coaches, and we're going to come back to Fisher in a second. Arnett also got let go from Mississippi State.
Oh yeah.
That. We're right now. That's 2 SEC coaches just this weekend, and then you've got potentially 2 more that are on the hot seat and potentially are going to be gone too.
Yeah.
So that's going to be 4 SEC coaches, which makes you just go, what in the world's happening in the SEC? But Jimbo Fisher,
it was a down year for them this year. So
well, clearly, that's why they have how many teams in the top 10? 3. That's right.
You didn't even give me a chance to answer.
Yeah, no, I'm just
kind of shocked. It's 3.
I know, right? It's weird. I don't understand Missouri there, but I get it. They snuck in. I also don't understand why Tennessee's in the top 25 either. I'm just putting it out there, not trying to be a homer. But essentially at the end of the day, it's one of those things like Fisher. He's clearly a really good talker.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's been what the past few years have been. Fisher has just been talking a really nice game. He's good at recruiting. He's good at making himself look good and that stuff. He just doesn't know how to coach, and it's clear. I'm just reminded of the tweet that Lane Kiffin made earlier this year. I think it was earlier this year when Fisher came out after he announced that he had hired an offensive and defensive coordinator. He's like, "Hey, well, listen, we're all running the same plays. We're all it's all about how you all your fundamentals and how you execute it. The players are playing." And I remember you got Lane Kiffin who goes and at Kirby Smart, and he goes, "Hey, did you know this? Like, did you know it's only this? That's it. That's all that matters." And so it's just like it clearly that's not the case. They're not all playing the same plays.
Right.
Like they're not like, and so Fisher's just has made excuse after excuse after excuse for every mediocre year he's had, and he's been stacked with talent. If you put that same roster on a Tennessee or even a Bama or a Georgia doesn't need it. But let's say you put it on Bama would be impossible to beat.
Right.
And Bama already has a good stacked roster this year. But like last year when when Texas A&M was bringing in the best recruiting class ever, even if you were to give that to Auburn with Hugh Freeze this year, that would have been a much better coached team. And it has at the end of the day, it's just. Yeah, they're paying a lot of money, but it's just because of the fact that they want him out of there because they know that they're worth more. They know they're worth more than the middle of the pack, and I would agree with that. They're an awesome fan base that has a ton of potential.
They do,
but they just haven't really hit anything because of the fact that they've had just honestly kind of bad coaches.
They check all the boxes.
They do.
You got the fans, you got the money, you got the
a pretty ideal location too as well.
Yep.
It's Texas. Texas loves football.
Texas loves football. You've got facilities, you've got an administration that will pay, will back with, the finances. The only thing they haven't had is a coach who can do with the talent what he should be able to do.
Exactly. So, but talking about, coaches and doing what they're not supposed to do or doing what they didn't do and stuff like that.
What are they able to do?
Are able to do. Yeah.
So let's go to implosions. And we're going to talk about Colorado here. So Colorado is my team. Last week we talked about USC being kind of our implosion of the week for everything that was going on, and this week it's going to be Colorado. Colorado lost again, which we shouldn't be surprised at this point. Like, that's just kind of a given.
We have a streak
but they lost last-second field goal to Arizona. But the bigger loss, I think, is that a 5-star commit, wide receiver Winston Watkins, actually decommitted from Colorado as well.
Yep.
And one of the comments that he said was he didn't know that when he got there that Coach Sanders was still going to be there. So that's a pretty big loss for him.
True.
At this point they are, what are they, 4-8? Or no, they're 4-6.
That's what
right
we
now.
think is probably going to be the
they're
record.
4-6 right now,
but we added a couple of
you're right. They've got Washington State, who's not been spectacular themselves, and Utah is their last 2 games. And I really think they're going to be 4-8. They started 3-0. They went 1 for 6 in their next 7. But then you really think, like, Deion is a great recruiter, and kind of like you're talking about Jimbo Fisher, like being able to pump himself up and kind of talk a good game. Deion definitely talks a good game.
Oh, yeah.
But his coaching has got to get better. There's so many things, time management. He has been horrible with his time management, especially towards the end of games when he's calling timeouts, when he's not. The couple weeks ago or last week, I think, when they ran the ball and then had to punt and they went into halftime down 14-3 instead of 17-3 because of or 7-3 because of that. And then just things that he's been doing with, like, calling out his offensive line, changing his play caller. It's just, it looks bad.
Yep.
And with all the hype that they had at the beginning, it's been just an implosion since. And I've kind of held off on calling them out, but at this point, they've definitely hit implosion status in my mind.
I mean, they might get lucky with the next year, man. They're leaving the Pac-12 because, like you said, they finished 1-6 in the Pac-12. I mean, they're about to finish 1-8.
Right.
So maybe they might have better luck next year in the Big 12.
Yeah, they might. They might.
They may be, but Big 12 is not an easier conference. Like, it's not like it. There might be some more teams that are bottom of the barrel, like they have been this year. but it's they. You still have Oklahoma. You still have the Texas. You still have the random BYU that likes to upset
Show up
people,
randomly.
and Baylor and
Yeah.
Kansas and Kansas State. Like, so it's not even UCF. You know, they pulled a nasty upset this weekend. So, you know,
But and we'll see, like with his recruiting and
Mhm.
with his ability to recruit and pull in some
I feel like getting a
transfers.
full season
Yeah,
is going to see impressive what he can do.
yeah,
Yeah.
And he has. I mean, for Colorado, if you take out everything we just talked about, Colorado going from a 1-win team to a 4-win team is very impressive. And
that's
so at
400% improvement.
Right. So you can give him credit for that. I just think that when you start off 3-0, you talk a big game. When you're 4-6, after that, you've imploded.
Yeah.
So, but hopefully they can do that and do better.
I mean, they're going to finish with about what a 333% percentage record.
True.
Not too bad. You
Yeah.
get into the baseball Hall of Fame with that.
Yeah,
right?
if you can, man.
Hey,
Some people can't
hey,
get those numbers, you know.
That's
right.
true. Definitely
Well,
not me this week. But
and
we're
then
not talking about that yet.
We'll just go ahead and move into the bad reffing
Okay.
this week.
Yeah.
Bad reffing is going to go to the refs that missed the pass interference call against Louisville or against Virginia, or no, it was against Louisville on Virginia in that last drive.
Yep.
If you watch that, it was, Louisville was up. They were up by a touchdown. Virginia's moving the ball pretty well. They
Mhm.
kind of got stalled, 4th and 10, and they have this pass. They pass out to their wide receiver, and Louisville's defender is draped all over him.
Yep.
I mean, he looked more like a backpack than a defender. And just it was clearly pass interference.
Yeah.
And the ball hits, no flags. Everybody kind of sits there looking at him.
Yeah.
And it was just obvious. And so it's, again, one of those things, if this was in the second quarter and they kind of had time to
Mhm.
overcome that, that's one thing. But when you're, 4th down, you're going to get a first down. You're driving. There's a minute left. You're down 7. There's just all these factors that you're like,
Yeah.
everybody's watching. You got to make that call.
Mm-hmm.
Got to make that call.
Yeah.
The only thing that was close to this week was got to throw it out there, Miami. That was a safety.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. This one was just worse in my opinion. So there you go.
Fair
And
enough.
then bad coaching
Mhm.
is going to go to my game of the week coach, James Franklin.
Oh, look at that.
James Franklin. Again, these are some of the things that he does, which is why I think that you won't see him at Penn State for very much longer, maybe a year, maybe 2. But after their first touchdown in the first half, he went for 2. And I kind of see what he was doing. I see what he was doing. I don't think it was right. But it was going to put them down if they got it. Put them down 3 instead of 4.
Yep.
And he even mentioned, like, we thought that points were going to be tough to get, so we wanted to get points when we could. It's like, well, that's why you kicked that extra point instead of going for 2, because you've got a whole half left. Again, kind of see what he was talking about, but just think that it was wrong and don't think he was a very smart call. But then the thing that kind of solidified him as the bad coaching for the week was in the second half, Michigan dominated them on the run.
Yep.
We all know that Penn State, the best part of Penn State's team is their defense.
Mm-hmm.
And with on a 4th down on their own 30 with about 4 minutes 20 seconds to go, he decided to go for it, go for a 4th down. And they didn't get it. And I think the very next play, Blake Corum ran for the last touchdown.
Yep.
But with 4 minutes and 20 seconds to go, when you're down, I can't remember what they were down at that point. I think like 6 or 7 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And the best part of your team is defense. You give them the option. You don't go for it on 4th down already in field goal range for the other team. Just a horrible, horrible call.
Yep.
So he's going to get the bad coaching for the week. So James Franklin, do better.
That's fair. Now, and while he made some bad coaching calls and stuff like that, he does not take the pie like like this guy.
He's not humble. James Franklin.
That's true. I'm just a humble guy. I'm so humble. That's what I keep on telling
The
myself.
whole pie by himself.
I eat the whole pie by myself. Yeah. So if you didn't watch any football this past weekend, I did great. That was awesome.
Michael basically didn't watch football either because he got everything wrong.
I got everything wrong. No, I still watched it. I watched all of my hopes and dreams just disappear. No, I mean it ended up just being a blowout on pretty much every single game that I called. It was the exact opposite, And I did think when when I was originally looking at picking upsets, I was like, man, UCF is actually in a pretty nice spot right now. They could probably pull it. I was like, Oklahoma State's probably really excited about the fact that they just beat Oklahoma.
They just had a hangover.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
and yeah, they were clearly went into that game with a hangover. If I had even thought about it, I would have called that one instead. So not really going to dwell too much on the humble pie that I clearly have to eat. Because all you need to know is I was wrong. That's all you need to know. I was just wrong.
The last episode.
Go watch the last episode. Comment. Yeah, Michael was wrong.
Entirely.
Entirely. 100%. No more 33%. No more 25%.
This time you got 100%.
I got 100%.
Just 100%
yeah.
wrong.
So it's one of those things like So that happened. So that leads us into my upset picks for this week. So.
Can't do any worse than last week.
Can't do any worse. Can only get better. So my again, I'm gonna kind of rank things based upon what I feel like their impact is gonna be on the playoffs. So I'm gonna start with the least impactful. I'm picking Clemson over North Carolina. I think Clemson's starting to figure themselves out a little bit more. North Carolina has not looked phenomenal. Like they look okay, but the only reason they won against Duke was just because of the fact that Duke didn't have Leonard.
Yeah.
Like I'm like in that we talked about it. Like Cam Rising makes such a big difference on Utah. Leonard makes a huge difference
he
on
sucks,
Duke.
but he makes a big difference.
Yeah, and exactly, and he needs to remember that because he needs some humble pie too. We all do. But I just feel like Clemson is probably going to pull out the win here. We are getting closer to the end of the season and stuff like that, but it's just one of those games where they're enough of a rivalry. It's a border rivalry because you got South Carolina versus North Carolina, and so I could really see that. That upset happen. The next one that I've got is going to be Oregon State beating Washington. Oregon State has a much better defense than Washington does. And Oregon State's offense does know how to move the ball. Washington has shown that while they can keep up with good defenses, they can stall out too. They're prone to stalling out. Penix has not been perfect this year. There was a game he didn't even score an offensive touchdown.
Right.
That's an issue. That's the only reason why I would even keep him out of my contender as a Heisman Trophy finalist is only because of the fact that you still had at least one game where you didn't show up. And so I feel like Oregon State would just like to make would like to make kind of like a final stand of because they have to play Oregon next, so that's going to be their big game. I think they call that the Civil War.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be their big game. And honestly, Oregon State probably would see it as a complete win if they were able to go in, beat Washington, and then beat Oregon next week.
They would be happy.
They would be so happy. Their
whole season would be justified.
Exactly, and they've had a good season so far. And most of the teams they've lost to have been quality losses. But my final upset of the week, and this one is the longest shot, but also potentially going to be the most detrimental to the number one team in the playoff, which would be Tennessee beating Georgia. And I know I have to put a homer thing out or whatnot. I don't know where our homer placard is. But essentially, like it won just as an upset. It's a huge upset. If it happens, my confidence in the upset's not very high. I'm just being honest.
Right.
So that's where my homer isn't out. But Georgia themselves, if Georgia loses, we talked about this. If Georgia loses to Tennessee and then loses to Alabama, I feel like they're completely out of the playoff.
Oh, and to be fair, like you look at it and like you can see, I think we called this. I said yesterday in our text, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Exactly.
Like this is one of those. Which UT are you going to get?
Yep.
Because there have been some games this year that UT has looked amazing. And
there's even been one game,
right?
Like single games where you're like, hey, great half,
right?
Horrible second half,
yep.
Right. So they've looked awesome, and then there's other games where you just go, how are they even playing?
Yep.
So it's like which one shows up? If the former shows up, man, UGA is going to have a run for their money.
Yep.
If the latter shows up, then UGA's third stringers are going to get a lot of.
Yep. Well, and the last time that Tennessee lost at home was 2 years ago to Georgia. So this would be a nice, this would be a very, it has a nice ring to it for Tennessee to be able. It gives them another thing to fight for.
Yeah.
In just
a little bit of revenge.
A little
I
bit
feel
of
like
revenge.
for Tennessee too, as well. Like if they were to beat Georgia, it'd be like, hey, we didn't finish the season on the most like way we were probably suggested to win, but hey, you guys knocked out a top team.
Yeah.
Like so.
Wait, exactly, and I think that would help build some of the confidence of the team going into the bowl season. Also help with recruiting. I mean, Tennessee's done all right in recruiting and stuff like that, but it would definitely bolster them probably into the top 10.
A win like that at the end of the year, kind of killing Georgia team's chances, especially if they lose to Alabama.
I mean, they have the same kind of recruiting round, so definitely a nice little hey.
We
saw what we did last year, right?
That's right.
Like, so
a few more pieces, and we do that all the time.
Exactly. Well, and so that leads us into our game of the week. I mean, my game of the week, of course, is going to be UGA versus Tennessee. That's the SEC game of the week. It would have been an even bigger game if Ole Miss had won and Tennessee had won. It would have been a really big game, but it's still a deciding game, like for the playoffs and stuff like that. So
I think you even mentioned before, if Tennessee is to win and then if they go to the SEC championship, Georgia loses then as well, like they're gonna be out.
Yeah, I don't see a scenario where the playoff committee puts them in unless they just want to have a three-peat, which I don't think they want personally.
No.
They want parity.
That'd be forcing the situation if they're too hard.
Yeah. So, but what else do you guys got?
So my game of the week is going to be in the Pac-10,
Okay.
Pac-12, sorry, and it's Utah, Arizona. I think we've got. I think it's just going to be a fun game. I don't know that this has too much. It doesn't have too much to move the Pac-12 in any direction. There's not going to be like a team that gets kicked out of everything. They're both bowl eligible. I just think that Utah has played well all year. They've kind of, like you said, third-string quarterback. He's coming in. He's making some strides. And then you've got Arizona, who's kind of done the same thing. They're 7-3, bowl eligible. I really like their quarterback, Fafita. He's been a lot of fun to watch. Especially
I feel like you enjoy saying his name.
I do. It's fun. Fafita. I think that they're very level playing field. I think both teams, their offenses are very similar. I think Arizona's a little bit faster, but Utah's got the better defense. So I just think it's going to be a fun game to watch. I like both teams. I like how both of them play. Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
again, no bearing on anything of importance.
Just fun.
But just fun.
Yeah, and it could honestly even be a low-scoring game. I mean, you got some.
It could be, yeah. I mean, both defenses are pretty stout.
Yeah.
So we'll see. So,
what you got, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, my game is kind of the game you mentioned just a moment ago. It's Washington versus Oregon State. I feel like it's actually going to be a really good game, though. And one of the reasons why I feel like Oregon State can actually maybe come out with a win, like I would actually agree with you there, Michael, because Washington previously played Utah. So they're going to be a bit banged up because Utah's defense is very physical defense. And so I feel like Washington's going to be a little bit banged up, where Oregon State, they literally just played Stanford, and I mean, Stanford's not much of a team. They blew them out 62-17, but that's the kind of energy and momentum you want to go into a game like this, where, hey, we have a top 5 team right now that we can definitely just kind of ruin their entire season. And I feel like this is kind of a nice kind of recipe there. One thing that does have me kind of think that Washington does have a chance of winning is they're actually it might surprise some people, but it's their run game.
Yeah,
like the run game. People have actually noticed it. The past, I think, I want to say like 3 games, the run game they've been having. Johnson here, I believe his first name is Dylan Johnson. The past few games, he's been averaging a little bit more than I feel like 130, 140 yards a game. So he's slowly been kind of picking up. I believe with USC, he had over 200. In the past 2 games, he's had over 100 yards. So before all this season, he actually haven't had any 100-yard games from what I've heard.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's a crazy stat that he's kind of pulling away. If Washington is able to kind of create a run game, it's the perfect time going into the Pac-12 championship and then potentially the college football playoffs.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, we got some fun games this weekend that are going to be really fun to look forward to.
This is the time of the year that kind of is fun to watch, teams go, okay, well, let's, our season, isn't what it was, but let's go knock them off.
Yeah.
Kind of what Tennessee is looking to do.
Let's
we
savage our
Yeah,
season.
we haven't done what our expectations were, but you know what? We can knock them off.
We can ruin someone else's
Yeah,
plans.
we can ruin somebody else's plans.
Yeah.
So.
Which is what I'm looking forward to. We're at that revenge area, which I love. I just love that. In Tennessee was on the back end of that last year with South Carolina. South Carolina destroyed Tennessee's chances of going to the playoffs, and then turned around the next week and destroyed Clemson's chances.
Yep.
So little interesting there, that they were able to do that. But that's for a topic for a different day. Anyways, thanks for joining tonight's Tailgate. Come back next week, grab a drink, and join the conversation.